Have you ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but something still feels off? Like you're doing all the work, the meditations, the journaling, the therapy, but you still don't feel totally connected to yourself? So many of us think that alignment is a destination, something you figure out once and then you're done. But what if alignment is something you're meant to rediscover again and again, as you change and as your life changes? In today's episode of In Alignment, we're joined by Brittany Felton for a conversation around intuition, energy, self love, and what it really means to trust yourself. We talk about why so many people override their intuition in favor of control, how to navigate periods of deep uncertainty and transition in our lives, and how human design can help you understand yourself more deeply. We also chat about what self love actually means. It isn't just a mindset, but a daily practice of listening to what you truly need. This episode is for anyone who feels like they're in a season of transition, anyone learning to let go of who they thought they should be, and anyone who wants to feel a little more aligned, not by forcing it, but by trusting themselves just a little bit more deeply. Because alignment isn't about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you already are. We're so excited to have you here today. Welcome to In Alignment. I'm Annie.
And I'm Marissa. You were meant to find this today, and we're so glad you're here.
Welcome to In Alignment, Brittany. We are so excited to have you here today. We'd love to kick it off with just a quick intro to yourself. I know you've been on one of our podcasts previously, but for the audience that hasn't listened to the last one or a quick refresher, would love just, the brief introduction to you and what you're working on these days.
Awesome. Thanks for having me back. This is so exciting. Yeah, I'm Brittany Felton. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a writer. I'm a human design reader, now a sort of content creator. I'm a home baker. I'm also an event specialist. I do like a lot of different things. And for those familiar with human design, I'm a manifesting generator. That would make sense for someone who has that sort of context. But I also have been on a very curious self-development journey, I would say, for the past, for all of my adult life, but I would say in a concentrated way for the past about 10 years. So that's how, Annie, you and I connected originally. And I'm excited to just chat about that, kind of what happens when, you really go on a journey of getting to know yourself and finding your alignment. So I'm so excited.
To kick it off, I would love to know what alignment means to you. Like, what does it feel like to be in alignment?
Mm. I think it is an ever evolving discovery, really and truly. And we've sort of talked offline about this as well, but finding the balance of the magic and the groundedness and bringing them together into one place is where I sit with finding my own alignment right now. I would say, in broad terms, alignment is learning to trust your intuition and finding the courage to day by day choose what's calling, right? What's calling loudest. And I don't know that that's necessarily always easy, but I think that with practice, that trust muscle really does grow. Um, and when you really do learn what it feels like to trust that and choose that over conditioning or what seems like the right thing, it is truly magical how things start to flow and magnetize. And what I always say when I'm doing human design readings is alignment is finding the flow versus the friction. And that's where I'm trying to live the majority of my life from these days.
It's a good point. I think too, the flow can feel more uncertain because sometimes, I don't know, someone taught me this a while ago. I feel like I repeat it constantly, but we're meant to go to all of these different places in our lives. We're meant to visit Rome and London and Paris, like all these different cities. Maybe those are different situations, they're different relationships, they're different experiences. And when the time is up in one place, we're meant to move to the next. And what we learned in that city or the experiences that we had and how we learned and grow, they contribute to the next chapter or they lead us to the next place. And sometimes we get these subtle nudges of it's time to go, like it might be time to book that train, to book the flight. Maybe you don't leave for 6 months, but it's time to start thinking about the next move. And I feel like that is an alignment nudge of, hey, to be aligned in your life and to continue on your evolution and your journey, it's time to start questioning this or make a change. but it's really hard because sometimes you can't see the full picture. Like sometimes you know you have to book a flight, but you don't really know what your apartment's going to look like, or you don't really know what the job's going to be, or what the next relationship's going to be like. But in alignment is that subtle intuitive nudge that, hey, this is starting to feel uncomfortable. Like, hey, something else might be up next. But it's hard to always be in alignment because oftentimes you're trusting intuition without seeing the greater picture.
Yeah.
And when you plan your life with shoulds and
Yeah.
logically mapping it out, you're like, "Oh, great. Like, I can force and control all of this, and I can see the next 20 years ahead of me." But that might not feel as good as when you just trust and let go.
Yeah, and also what a funny illusion it is to think we can control so much or to stress so much about having so much control when the reward of sort of surrendering some of that control is so great and amazing because like I said, it produces these really magical feelings when I think what you were saying, it is hard, but there comes a point where you have to tip over that edge of fear because even the unknowns don't matter as much anymore as staying in what you know is stale and played out and what it's like wearing clothes that are too tight, you know? It just feels like you're bursting at the seams for something new. And that will get to the point where that's so itchy and scratchy, you can't even stand that feeling anymore. So you have no choice but to really heed that call. And I think the more practiced and like we said, building that trust up is when you have a quicker reaction and you go, okay, I know it's going to be okay. I don't know what it's going to look like, but that's the fun of it. It turns from fear to excitement and curiosity, you know?
Totally. I feel this completely because I think that sometimes when we are future thinking and we find a lot of comfort in this imagined life where we can see a really clear path, even though that there's a million things that could change on that path, if we can see point A to point B really clearly, it takes such a level of discomfort and thinking like I don't even know if I want that point B. I cannot stay on this journey long enough that I have to make a shift. And that's ultimately where I think a lot of people start with that leap is whether it's a career or a relationship, you get to the point where the uncertainty of the unknown is actually less scary than the certainty of being maybe unhappy or unaligned for the
Ugh,
next 10, 20, 30 years of your life. And
so
then and over time it's easier to make those leaps, but sometimes like that first shift of starting over comes from just there has to be a better way.
yeah, totally agree with that. I think too, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. And it is, I am someone who loves the dreaming phase. I love the fantasy of the future. And I can't wait for this and I can't wait for that. Before I met my boyfriend, I couldn't wait to fall in love. And then I find myself in this beautiful, gorgeous relationship with truly the best human ever. And it's like I live my day to day without even centering myself into it and really appreciating and having full blown gratitude and joy for living in the presence of that fantasy come true. So there's also that next step of like once you do trust that intuition and then you somehow it's like that like we're talking about that alignment comes together, you find yourself living the life that you've always dreamt of. There's that next step of okay, but we can't immediately always be on to the next thing too. You know what I mean? It's like we also have to learn then how to center ourselves and have that appreciation and that gratitude, which I think just ultimately magnetizes you even more to that alignment and to those, you know, those pings or whatever we want to call them that lead us into the next, you know, stages of our life. That's something I have been thinking about so much lately is getting always being ahead sort of robs you of, wow, but look at where I am, you know?
So
Yeah.
do you think that that is rooted in fear? Like, is that a control mechanism? It's really funny you say that. I'm PMSing right now. Like, I've been kind of moody the past few days. My life looks exactly like what I dreamed of in October. Like, went through a big breakup this summer. I did deep work this fall. I mean, both of you know it. And I was doing TBM. I'm doing my manifestations. I'm writing out my dream life. Quite literally, almost all of it has come true. and
Mm.
I should be, like, the happiest I've ever been, and I am the happiest I've ever been right now, but I find myself then finding little things to worry about, or being like, "Well, this could be further along," or, "Well, what if this isn't really certain?" Or, "I could have done better at this," instead of just living in the gratitude for, like, "Wow, I went through a really hard time, and look at how amazing my life is on the other side of it." And I was thinking about this, and it's funny you just said that, because I was wondering if that's a control mechanism, if that's a protective part coming in saying, like, well, watch out, life can't be that good, don't relax into this, kind of keep bracing yourself because you should always be working or always trying to control the future. Don't relax into just what feels good. So I wonder if that is more of a control protective mechanism.
You know what I think it is? It's habit. It's habit and it's just conditioning. And it is this space that we've lived in for so long that that's when that practice piece really comes in of let me practice gratitude. Let me practice listening. Let me practice trusting because that ultimately will replace that fear and that need for control or that lack of appreciation for where we are. I'm saying this to myself because I'm in the middle of learning this as well, obviously. But yeah, I mean, anything that creates that anxiety and that need for control, I do think is rooted in fear, absolutely. But like I said, we get so into these, patterns and it really takes thought and awareness to make change in those spaces. I mean, not to mention if you go into a whole nother level of it, and I'm sure Annie and Marissa, you know about this as well, your body gets addicted to those chemicals that it's producing when it's freaking out, right? When we're in fight or flight, we have the cortisol response, we have all that. Your body gets used to that. So it's like, okay, everything's good, but I have a mole. You know what I mean? It's like there's always something we can find. I do it all the time. I was using
Medical anxiety is it's, yeah.
girl, like I was using a soap. This is so dumb. Using a soap in the shower, okay? I have it on my thing. I'm like lathering up and I looked down at the water and the water was like brown. And I was like, I'm I'm dying. I'm bleeding out. What's happening? It's the soap. The soap is like a bar soap, like natural bar soap that just has like a clay in it. And I was like, I need to calm down. Do you know what I mean though? That's like, why is that knee jerk? I've heard this rhetoric a lot lately too, which is like, if we can expect the worst, why can't we expect the best? But that is training. That is true training and habit is you if you think about expecting the worst, that is arguably how humans have survived the eons before we had the conveniences that we have today. Like, I had to think a tiger was going to eat me, or I would not have gone from ancient human to civilized, where we are now, right? So it is literally going against, I think, this like habituation of DNA almost, right? I mean, I'm going out there, but like truly, I think it's a lot when you start really getting into like, I want to reprogram how we are really conditioned to think we have to live to survive. And we are entering a different era where I just don't think that that is as true as it once was. And that is a luxury. I mean, it truly is. And, that we can have these conversations and really, really think deeply and do work on ourselves and like have the time is beautiful. And I think not to be taken for granted. Anyway, that was a tangent that started with soap in the shower.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about there's like an evolutionary element of it, and then there's also that our bodies learn these mechanisms to protect ourselves often in childhood. And even when they're not useful to us anymore as adults, it's just our natural conditioning to go into that overprotective mode.
Ugh.
I've heard recently a lot about like our fear and that ego lives in our mind and our body is much more present. And
Mm.
so trying to come back to the present by connecting with the body as being such a powerful tool. The appreciation and gratitude also is in the present moment. Yeah, I'm curious if that's a part of your practice of coming back to yourself or calming
Yeah.
your.
We talk about that if we look through the lens of human design, which is one of my favorite tools for achieving alignment. We're talking about your authority there, and your authority is basically like your decision maker, how you make the most aligned decisions for yourself. You could also just call it your intuition. So we would describe your mind as this sort of just data processing center. If you think about it like a computer, it's always going to be limited in what it can know because it's just taking in information, you know? And if you think about information in terms of language, language is limited. You can never actually describe with enough words what something feels like, the depth and the actual, to be redundant, feeling of something, right? And so our minds, though, we're so used to listening to them because they are circling and spiraling and talking to us all the time. Going back to kind of like the practice piece and the trust piece, that intuition and that grounding in your body, I always describe it as feeling it's quiet and it is relaxed and it usually is saying the same thing over and over and over, right? Or even if it's a whisper, it's telling you something consistent that generally makes your body, even if your mind is telling you it's not relieved by this, you feel relieved when you think of this choice, right? And so, yeah, I think that the more that we can ground into our bodies and learn what it feels like to listen to that intuition, that, you know, depending on sort of like where your belief systems are, but I think we're all really connected through energy and, you know, on this sort of like soul level. That is almost like using your body as this conduit to speak to you. And it's so curious. And again, like I'm always in the middle of my discovery and expanding sort of where, you know, what I believe and what makes sense for me. I just think that this connection piece is even broader than just like a body thing. It really is such a felt experience. Does that make sense? So while I do think that, like, yes, your body is like this beautiful, grounded space where you are having this sort of 3D experience, it really is learning to allow those messages and that, you know, that calm voice speak louder than anything else, especially that mind that's just the constant, like, but it could be this, but what if, blah, 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 you know? So I hope that answers your question. Like I said, I love having this conversation because I think all of us are just like in this journey, you know? I love thinking about it.
Yeah, and I feel like so much of our anxiety comes from arguing with our gut intuition, especially when your gut intuition is telling you something you don't want to be true, whether it's leave your relationship or I hate this job or this city isn't working for me. And these are things that you intellectually and your ego and your idea of yourself is like rooted in these things. Like that argument that you have with yourself, I think leads to a lot of the pain and anxiety and just difficulty in feeling aligned in our everyday life.
100%. Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit in the first episode, Annie, that we did together. But I moved back to Atlanta just 3 weeks before the lockdown happened in 2020. And that was a very sort of kismet situation. But I had been in LA for 8 years pursuing acting, and I had finally found this apartment that I absolutely adored. I actually had a dream 3 months before I moved it was literally a nightmare that I had lost my apartment or given up my apartment. And then I started feeling this whisper of, but what if I moved back to Atlanta? But what if I did move back to Atlanta? And then it was like I could not get that out of my brain. But it was the mind that was going, yeah, but you love your apartment. And if you get out of line, you'll never make it. And you'll be like a failure, giving up all the classic stories, right, that we tell ourselves. I finally heeded that call, did move home, ended up just so luckily getting to ride out that crazy time in my childhood home with my parents. I was safe and, you know, it was this beautiful connection time for my family. And then, but I always had the sort of idea that I would collect myself and then move back to Los Angeles. And then in 2021, uh, I was literally 3 days away from moving away from home for a job that would have eventually taken me back to LA. And my dog, I leaned down to kiss him. He bit the end of my nose, took off the end of my nose nearly. I had to get 12 stitches. And after 10 days of shock, recovered. That is when exactly what you're talking about came so into play. And this is when I learned this lesson. It was like really just like a slap in the face, like a loving slap in the face of this is what it feels like to listen to what you really truly want versus what you think you should want, which was, and this is what my mind was saying. Well, you have this amazing job that's going to take you back to Los Angeles so you can finally achieve your dreams. You don't want to do it because you think you're afraid of it. You need to walk through that fear because facing your fear is what you're supposed to do in life, right? When I would think about the other choice, which was staying in Atlanta and seeing what it had to offer me, who I hadn't met yet, what could my life be back at home? It was like my body felt the greatest relief. I was like, oh God, that sounds so nice. And then my brain would go, but see, that's the easy choice. So you're not allowed to choose it because we have to choose the hard choice because we have to face our fears and we have to walk through that. Okay, well, finally, I said, you know what? I just want to choose the easy choice then. I don't care. I prefer easy this time. And I chose to stay in Atlanta. And my entire life, it looks different than I ever thought it would have at this point. But I also have so many things that I longed for so long, you know? And whether it was due to that decision or not, it was choosing what felt best, right? And it was choosing that relief that, like, when I was really truly honest with myself, whether it was the easy choice or not, it didn't matter. It felt better. And I mean, that was like a life-changing lesson and also a life-changing event, truly.
I had such a similar experience when I was living in New York. I knew my time was up. The city was so overstimulating to me. I didn't feel good there. I wanted to go back to Boston, but Boston felt like the easier choice. It's where I'm from.
Mhm.
It's quieter. I thought I wasn't going to have as big of a life. I thought the career was going to be in New York. Ironically, the career was in Boston because I'm actually starting my own business, and it makes sense now. But at the time, I had so much guilt and shame, and I was just forcing myself. Oh, well, if I moved from the West Village to FIDE, okay, this will be a little bit quieter. It'll be more manageable. And then I was about to sign a lease in Brooklyn. And I started breaking out in full body histamine rashes, head to toe, burning skin. Like it was terrifying. I remember the first time it happened to me, I was about to get on a flight leaving New York, actually. And I called my doctor. I was like, what is going on? And they're like, we think it's hives, but it was full body. And then it would happen like once a week. And then I was like, teetering on this decision, pretty much decided to stay. And then it started happening every day. Like in the office, and my ears would be on fire, my face would be on fire. It was crazy. And I went to my dermatologist and they're like, it's psychosomatic. And I made the decision to leave New York, to go back to Boston. I left my job to give myself like 4 months to try and start a company, which had always been my dream. The day I left New York, I never got another rash. I've never had another rash.
Telling you, and this is what we're talking about, that thing where you don't know what's on the other side, but you have to take the leap.
I
Like you
have to do
really
it.
kind of get to the point where, and you know, I there's obviously it's like there's that whisper until it's the yell, right? Learn to listen when it's the whisper. The more you do this and the more you practice this, but it will always get to the point where you don't have any other choice. You know what I mean? God.
Also think something that you said that was really interesting is sometimes in life, we feel that we shouldn't. We feel guilty for taking the easier path, but I think it's not about what's easier or harder. It's what is the intention behind that decision. And if
Mhm.
the easier choice is because it feels aligned, because it feels safe, because it feels intuitive, because it feels expansive, because it feels creative, because it feels like we're taking a risk on ourselves and it feels more joyful, then like easy is actually alignment can feel like the easier choice.
It
I
should,
think
in fact.
sometimes it should. I
Yeah.
think sometimes it can feel a little bit harder, but it is because I'm afraid to take a bet on myself. This feels a little bit uncomfortable, but I kind of think that I can do it. Then that version of hard is usually right. But if hard is rooted in shoulds or the intention is I'm not as good, or I'm going to be behind, or people are going to look at me differently, or I might be perceived, you know, as not as strong or capable or motivated, whatever it may be, whatever the narrative is in your head, then that hard is not the right choice. But I think it's what is the intention behind the hard or the easy.
Mm, I think you're so right on that. I love that. And it also it goes back into that sort of force versus flow piece as well, you know? I also think there's so much conditioning around the idea of hard because when you're doing hard work that you genuinely love and want to be doing, it doesn't necessarily feel hard, you know? But we're so conditioned to think that doing good work and something that matters requires a painful hustle and struggle. It doesn't have to be that, you know? And I think that when we talk about getting into alignment, it's also because undeniably bad shit is going to happen. I mean, this is a crazy time that we live in, undeniably. I've used that word a couple of times now, but it is setting yourself up to be able to navigate and handle that from a self confidence and a place of flow, right? And alignment. But the reason that we're getting into that alignment, sorry, I'm working this out as I'm saying it, is so that that we know that we are able to successfully handle all the things that are going to come our way because yes, we do still live in this world where we have to pay our bills and we have to do, you know, things that we don't necessarily want to do. But as much as we can be listening to those, you know, that really grounded, trusted, quiet, intuitive voice. That's what's, I think, setting us up for peace ultimately.
I think part of it is when we've outsourced so much of our personal identity to those things feels like we can't shift course without fundamentally changing who we are. And so for me, on my kind of journey, as I've switched careers, a lot of things that I felt about myself have come down. I've realized that outsourcing that sense of self and that worth to those things makes you very vulnerable to those life changes. Like if something happens or whatever, and you've staked your happiness on a certain person or a certain title, that will rock you. So if you're able to bring that happiness back inside, or at least for me, that has been my like the challenge of my year has been how can I be happy and content with myself regardless of these external titles or things or whatever is going on. And that gives you a kind of safety that I think
Mm.
trying to control all of the other life events can just never quite achieve.
That is huge. That is huge. And I do think that is the biggest piece that you're saying does span career, relationship, everything is ultimately having that relationship with yourself is so key. And I will stand by, I think doing the work on yourself is the most important work you can do because it allows you then to help others from such a different place because you understand why you're doing it and you understand how and you come from a calm confidence because exactly what you're saying, your identity is not rooted in what job do I have, who I am in a relationship with, because we don't ultimately have control over all of that, right? That could go away at any second. But you're always going to have yourself to come back to. You're always, I mean, you literally are you you're born and you die with yourself, right? And I remember that feeling when I was 34 years old. I'm 42 now. 34. It was like right before I turned 35. I don't know what it was, but I was like, I got to figure this out. And by this out, I meant, what am I doing? Who am I? And what do I really want? And kind of similarly to where y'all are, I was coming off of a horrendous situationship that had gone on for like a year and a half, totally identity shifting and world rocking and dark, dark night of the soul, right? And crawling out of that required that deep work. But that was when it was almost like an out of body experience where I was like sitting next to myself so much of the time and doing all the kinds of work that we know about, like reparenting or getting to know myself. I don't know why I keep using air quotes, but like it really is so powerful when you give yourself that gift of self love, not to use a word that's very buzzworthy. And I mean that from like the purest place that I can convey that message. Loving yourself the way that you would love a little tiny baby is so beautiful. And it really is what levels you up into the next chapter or the next step or the next whatever of of life, because then you're bringing that out into the world wherever you go, circling back to career, to relationship, and to all of that. So I think that's such a powerful point you make, Marissa, is that like when you're basing your identity on things outside of you, it's really, I mean, I don't want to sound as dramatic as dangerous, but it means that you losing any sense of who you are or your worth when that, goes away.
I think too, the goal, and it's difficult, but I remember a friend told me this years ago about being in a romantic relationship. And obviously, you're going to love your partner, your husband, your boyfriend, whoever, wholeheartedly. But you also know that like you are always going to be okay, even if that goes away. And I think that's with anything. That's with a job, that's with a friendship, that's with an apartment, that's with an income, that's with a romantic partner, that's with your family members, is the ability to not attach the cord of your self worth to that external thing, whether it's a person, a place, or experience. Keep that cord in your self worth internally and still be able to invest wholeheartedly in the experience, in the moment, give all of your love, and not always be bracing for, well, what if this goes away? Or, if you're in the early innings of a relationship, well, what if their tone shifts and they're not as interesting? Okay, well, I have to protect myself now. It's like, no, like lean in and give wholeheartedly and experience life right now and be grateful for the moment. Like, again, some things are meant for a season, not a lifetime, and know that you're going to be okay regardless. And I think that that is like the deepest form of self trust and security. But I want to ask both of you, because I feel like this is a topic that you both know really well. What are self love feels like a big ask and it feels a little bit intangible. What are ways that you both have begun to cultivate that internally? And what are like daily practices or rituals, tools? Like what do you do that can make that feeling a little bit more tangible?
I was actually going to say that we should define self love because it was the most mystifying concept to me for so long. It almost annoyed me. It's like, what do you mean love myself? Like, it, and it wasn't clicking for me, like saying nice things to myself in the mirror, right? Like that, those things are nice for the moment, but it wasn't really restoring like a deep sense of self. And I think what Annie was saying about not having a relationship be able to end without feeling like abandoned, especially for people like I have always said, I have abandonment issues stemming from childhood. The cure for that can never be in a stable partner. The only cure for that can be in not abandoning yourself. So that was like what clicked for me that helped me realize it isn't about finding a healthy partner or having a really safe life. I tried so hard to do that, right? I tried to make sure everything in my life was in my control. I was choosing the right things because I didn't want to experience abandonment. And all along, what I needed to learn was how do I not abandon myself? And for me, that work looked a lot like trying to understand not to get too deep into like all the inner child stuff, but it was what piece inside of me feels hurt or feels broken. How do I listen to that and respond to it with myself? With Brittany, you said like, parenting a child. It's kind of similar to doing that for yourself. It's being able to understand what feels good for my body that day. What does my mind need? What do my emotions need? And being able to give that to myself. And sort of the more I flex that muscle of listening, coming back to the present, understanding where that's coming from and delivering what I need, the more peaceful I feel overall and the more sense of self I feel. Mm. But yeah, totally used to mystify me. I did not understand what that even meant.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point. And I think also, I have a few thoughts on this, and I will tell you specifically kind of what I do. I do want to say a few things, though. If you are driven to really figure out what it means for you, you will figure it out eventually. So I think whatever you deeply, truly want, you will get. And if you are looking for a relationship with yourself and what does self-love mean to me, if that is honestly a journey that you want to take, you will go on that journey and you will eventually. And what I mean by that is you'll hear the podcast where finally somebody says something that clicks for you. You'll read a book where finally that clicks for you. Timing is such a huge piece in all of this. And that is something you want to talk about control. We don't have control over the timing of things, right? So I do just want to say that I think it's so important that you bring up being mystified and probably frustrated by what the hell are people talking about? Like, what are you talking about? I get that. I do. So yeah, I think just sort of like saying that up top, where if you want to go on the journey, you will. You just got to keep practicing and you got to keep going through the motions and figuring out what works for you and what language speaks to you. So, a few things specifically that work for me. I got into meditation. I started with 5 minutes a day. I will say the caveat that I think that once we become too obsessed with our ritual and start punishing ourselves when we don't meditate one day, that completely is defeating the purpose. So for me, flexibility is a huge part when it comes to ritual routines that work for me. But meditation always is something I come back to. And I can tell when I've gone too far away from it. If I've gone a week without meditating, I can feel. And the reason that works for me is because it does bring me back to stillness and presence. So stillness and presence are a big theme in my life as well that help ground me. Human design is a huge tool. And I think the thing about human design is that it's a really practical explanation of how you work. And I find that I'll say 90% of the time, people are reading or getting readings where they're being told things they already deep down know about themselves. And that gives validation and then permission to live even more into that. And so I think if you are on a journey where you're feeling a bit mystified, that can almost ground it where you're like, that is something that's specific to me outside of my career or my relationship. That really is how I am. So that's kind of a tangible piece that you can start to work from if you are looking for what in the heck does self-love even mean? Getting to know, even your astrology, or there's so many modalities that work for wherever you are starting from. And then this is very silly, but I'm going to tell you anyway because it works for me. Like I said, sort of almost that out of body, like looking at yourself as almost like two entities in a way. I don't know if you have ever read the books, the Golden Compass series. It's a trilogy of books. They also made an HBO series about it. I love these books. I don't know what it is about them. They're, fantasy and blah, blah, blah. But the main sort of thing about the book is that everyone's soul lives outside of their body in the shape of an animal that is specific to them, that morphs as they grow and kind of go through, puberty, basically, morphs into whatever their animal is going to be. And the way that the love and the connection that these characters have with their animal or their soul, they're called demons in the book, but the connection that they have resonated so deeply with me because that is what I try to think about and cultivate is this deep love and connection that is truly like an unconditional deep love. So what I'm saying is I do think of myself and as my soul sometimes as an animal living outside of my body that I want to take the very best care of and that I love and have compassion for and that I'm willing to forgive and that I'm willing to go on this journey with and make mistakes with and, have successes with and all this. So that's a silly example, but I do think sometimes it can, I don't know, maybe that won't work for everybody and I'll be like, that's weird. But I do think that like there is an element to being able to separate yourself a little and look through the window of who you are and find those pieces that you really love and appreciate and start, growing from there. But like I said, it is a journey constantly and it is a practice and I don't think it ever stops. I really don't. But I do love that you brought that up because I think that's so true. Like when you start, you can be like, what are you talking about? There's so much conditioning and there's also just like different personalities. Some people aren't as drawn to this kind of work as other people are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. But I do think that like it is exploring all that there is to offer because there's so many different ways into self-discovery and self-love and this kind of work.
I think something I mean, you both are TVMers, so you know what magnetic rituals are, but they're things that make you feel like your most authentic self. Brittany, you and I talk a lot about coffee and that morning ritual. But what I've been doing even before I started TBM and learned what a magnetic ritual is for the past 3 years, every single month, I create a folder in my notes app, and it's called Favorites. So it's like favorites December 2025 or January 2026. And as I'm like, "Oh, I love that," or like, "This is my favorite meal right now," or "I'm obsessed with, like, hanging out with this friend," or "This workout class," or "This new sweater I bought," or "This nighttime shower routine," literally whatever. I write it down. And those have oddly started even before I got into this work years ago, started helping me cultivate that sense of self-love and understand. I think a lot of self-love too is understanding who you are authentically. Like,
Mm.
what do you crave? What lights you up? What makes you feel creative and expanded and inspired and energized? And something it can be so simple as creating a list of like your favorite things. And nothing's dumb. It can be a song at a specific temperature walking outside, or it can be like a specific healthy brownie mix that you make at 4 p.m. when it's cloudy on a Sunday. Like whatever the vibe is, write it down. And that helps you start to understand what energizes me. And it's fulfilling because it's a list of things that you give to yourself. So
Yes.
I think that that can be like a really not silly, but like an easy and fun way to start this too.
Love
I
that.
like that too.
I love it. It's making me think when I was like 12, I don't know what inspired me to do this, but I specifically remembered I actually wrote a Substack about this like a year and a half ago. I made a list called Things I Love when I was 12 years old. And I put like a fabric sample that was like blue toile that I thought was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I wrote down like brand new mascara, coffee, jelly sandals, like all these things that I was like, I wasn't even wearing mascara when I was 12. So I don't know what I was talking about, but it was like it was like a list of, I guess at that point, who I wanted to be, you know? I love making a list. Like that makes me want to do that
It's
again.
so fun.
I love that too because it makes it easy to, like, do something nice for yourself. Because I was also just thinking, like, the other ultimate act of self-love is to listen to, like, what you want or what you're craving and give yourself something joyful without any guilt. Like, I think about when you're a child, so much of what you do every day is driven by, like, what would feel really good today? Like, what friends do I wanna see? I'm gonna go outside, I'm gonna play, I'm gonna be creative, and as life goes on, our days become more and more around what you have to do or what you're forced to do, and it's like, do you even like going to that morning workout class, or are you going there because you will feel so guilty if you don't? You're going to a job you maybe don't like, then your whole day is revolving around shoulds and musts, and giving yourself like a nap without guilt, giving yourself a dance on a walk, like a cookie, like whatever it is without guilt or shame is such like a small micro way to give yourself a piece of that love, or like, and I love keeping a list of your favorites to just make it easy to like pick from, you know?
That is so good.
I think this would be a really interesting segue into human design because Marissa just figured out her human design and she's a projector, which
Yes.
means that you need more rest and naps. And I feel like that epiphany for you was like, oh my God, I don't need to feel guilty about taking a nap midday. And not for me to explain, but the two of you should touch on that because I think that that's a really good example of what we're talking.
Yeah, I would love, Brittany, just because I just learned about human design. So for you to explain like what it even is, because yeah, for me, even just dipping my toe in, it is so validating to see and understand. And like you said, a lot of this stuff are things that I kind of knew, but to have it recognized
Mm.
gives
You
you
have
almost, you
it
feel
gives
seen
permission.
in
Yeah.
permission. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so what human design talks about is how your energy works, or ultimately how your kind of aura flows, right? So there's 5 different energy types, 2 of which are categorized into energy types, and then the other 3 are non-energy types. So we've got generators and manifesting generators, which me and Annie are generator and manifesting generator. So we fall under the energy type, and what that means is we have definition in our sacral center. Obviously we could go even more in depth, but if anyone's really curious, there's so many sources online to look up what in the heck human design is. But I will back up just to say it's a synthesis of the Chinese I Ching, Kabbalah tree of life, astrology, and also the chakra system. So when I talk about centers, they sort of correspond with like chakras. So generators and manifesting generators have this definition, their sacral center, which means we have this self-sustaining life force energy. That life force energy gets turned up by running towards the things that light us up, right? By doing work that we genuinely and deeply love, and by as much as we can auditing out the shoulds in our life, because we do have a lot of energy for a lot of different things. It's quite easy to say yes to everything and then get ourselves into situations that we resent or don't want to be a part of, right? But like I said, the generators and manifesting generators are, like they sound like, sort of the battery for projectors, manifestors, and reflectors to kind of like plug into and work off of almost. So lots of energy coming, from the manifesting generators and generators. So you as a projector, Marissa, projectors have this beautiful and like very like almost like penetrating aura where they are very much able to see and guide people. There's like a really innate knowing of humans and how people work. We like to say it's like a 30,000-foot view, right? So you can kind of see how all the pieces come together, sort of like a lighthouse, right? Like you are the light that's guiding the ships into shore, and the generators are down there being like, we're getting our ships in, right? Like we're all working towards a common goal, right? But so because you're doing a lot of energetic work in that way, using, your sort of, like I said, innate sense of guidance and really understanding and feeling people. It's like a very, it is, of course, like empathy, but it is taking on people's energy, allowing yourself that time to rest and sort of discharge all that energy that you're taking in is really, really important. Now, I've been thinking about this lately because I did a reading for my dad recently, and he's a projector. And I was shocked by this because the man has worked so hard his entire life and is just a go, go, go kind of guy. But he is a huge hobbyist. And I actually talked to him about this last night. His rest and recharge comes from his hobbies, right? So rest doesn't necessarily have to be laying down and taking a nap. Absolutely, it can be. I like to tell projectors being horizontal is very good for their chart, right? That's good for you.
I love.
It can also come from going for a walk, fishing, doing art, whatever it is that really does allow you to feel that, right? Is really important. And I think when projectors find that out, because generally projectors spend the first third of their lives, hustling and trying to be this generator. I want to get this done because you have the vision. So you really want to get it done. And it's like push, 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 push. And then the burnout and the burnout and the burnout, right? And projectors take a while to recover from burnout. It's not just like, all right, let me take a nap and I'll be ready tomorrow. It's like, don't talk to me for a week, right? Like I need to go off and be by myself. So the purpose and I think the power in human design is understanding those pieces of kind of the mechanics of just how our energy works. And because human design can get so specific into describing how you function in the world, it's so validating to hear it and to read about it. And it can, I think, be very mystifying for people. But there's just something about human design. It is so approachable for everybody that I have found it a really good bridge between people who are like, I don't want to hear anything woo woo, and people who are like, I'm a witch, So like it's such a good middle ground because it's pretty much spot on. And also just to back up a little more, or again, it's generated with all of your birth information. So very similarly to how you would find your zodiac sign or your birth chart. We're using birth date, time, and place. And then your chart is pulled up, like I said, synthesizing all of those sort of ancient wisdoms and spitting out what's essentially like a blueprint for your soul. Soul's purpose, things like this, challenges, themes, gifts especially. It can tell you all of that. But broad strokes, knowing your energy type, strategy, and authority are really, really powerful pieces to just sort of immediately start working with your alignment. And Marissa, you as a projector, your strategy is what we call wait for an invitation. I always like to mention the limit of language. And I find the word waiting to be really disempowering. It doesn't, it's doesn't mean we're sitting around being like, when's my invitation coming? It's more just knowing that you don't need to be forcing yourself out there, that when you are doing and truly living in your alignment, it's magnetizing those invitations to you, right? It's the friend coming to you for help. It's the company hiring you to help them figure out strategy. Whatever it is that you are naturally good at and drawn to, those start to really just flow towards you the more that you truly are honoring and living into your alignment.
It's so cool. Yeah, I loved it because I've done all the personality tests, right? Like I've done Myers-Briggs, I know my zodiac chart, but the
Yeah,
human design breakdown, and we haven't even done a reading. I definitely want to do that. But even
for
just like
sure.
getting it from online, some of these elements were so interesting to me because there are things that I've always identified as. For example, you said like hustler. At first I was like, no, that can't be me because I've worked so hard my whole life. But I also I I I do get exhausted by that type of output and that way of working in a way that absolutely makes me burned out. Or I've always thought I was this big extrovert because I'm really empathetic and I love talking to people and I get very energized by that. But I absolutely need to go off by myself and not talk to anyone for days at a time to
Yeah.
recover from some of those things. So
Yeah, it's so fascinating too because so many projectors are entrepreneurs and founders and doing work that you're conditioned to think you and again, I'm going to go back and say hard work isn't necessarily a bad thing if we're doing the things we love doing, but there's a way to really honor your projector energy and also be able to harness that vision and still bring it to life, knowing where your boundaries are and your edge lies, right? Like, okay, I got to go take a break now, right? That's going to just re-energize you to really keep bringing that vision into the world. And I think that I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like the the beauty of human design is that when we all are living in alignment, we all are living in alignment. And it's when you start to see if you've got a projector sitting at the top of a company with a bunch of generators and manifesting generators who are there because they're so passionate and excited to watch this come to life. And they have that energy to just work and work and work and work and work because they're so excited about it. They just like can't get enough. That's when you really start to see how all these pieces work together, right? Like the manifestors are giving us the ideas. The projectors have the vision for how that's all going to come together. The generators and the manifesting generators are bringing that all to life. And then the reflectors are really showing us, is this healthy? Is this good? Are we functioning properly? It is so beautiful. You really start to see how it all comes together. It's really cool.
And I think the other thing is releasing guilt and shame. My hope is that the more that you honor the way that you operate authentically and what feels good for you, the more aligned and successful you become. So if you are somebody who needs to go for an hour-long walk, and again, we're not all in this situation, and I very well recognize that, but an hour-long walk midday or a nap at 1 p.m. in between your meetings and you do more work at night, whatever it may be, that self-love and alignment and honoring what you need actually propels you further. Whereas if we have resistance and guilt and shame and like, no, I need to push through, or oh, I shouldn't look for another job because this one is looks really good on paper, or it's what I should be doing, even though it's burning you out and it's not, in alignment with how you want to be living and like it's grueling hours or hustle culture. The more that we try and force something that is not aligned with how we need to operate, the further we get away from what we're looking to do with our lives. So I don't know. I think that that's important. And you can even set boundaries. Like I remember at one of my last companies, I was in a conventional job. I was in the office Monday through Friday, pretty much 9 to 6. But I used to have like really bad period pain to the
Mhm.
point where I'd be throwing up. I was on the floor. I would faint at times. Like I was like down for the count. And I remember this was as I got into this work, I had an honest conversation with one of my female bosses. And I said, listen, like, I know it's not a great look to have 1 or 2 days that I'm sick every month, but this is what's going on and this is what I need. And as soon as I honored that, like, I honestly felt a shift physically because I'm like,
Wow.
it's self respect. Like, honor what you need.
Yeah. Wow.
and, like, working against it almost is counterproductive. Like, we think that if you just push, push, push because of that job looks good on paper, because we're expected to do so, it actually doesn't the results that you think that you want and are achieving from that, whether it's success, happiness, recognition, it's actually what I've kind of realized in my life, the opposite. So when I am honoring what I'm good at, even if we coming back to that point in the beginning, you might not see it so clearly. Like if you're in finance, there's a very clear hierarchy for how hard you need to work to climb that ladder. But in a different path, there might not be that visibility. But when you're doing something that honors you, when you're standing up for yourself, when you're taking care of yourself, when you're in the flow of, your passion and like doing those things, that actually, in what I've started to learn, things just open for you. Things come naturally. You're working just as hard, but like you said, Brittany, it feels easier. It feels natural. And there's this, I can't remember who said, I'm sure a lot of people have said this, but when you are trying to do something that is against, you're not interested in it, you don't like it, it's not good for you, whatever it is, there is someone else who like loves that thing and is really good at that thing. Find that thing that is for you and go do that thing, and you will surprise yourself by how far you get.
I actually have thought about that a lot recently as well. I take so much comfort in knowing that other people are interested in things that I would never be interested in. And you know what I mean?
Thank
Thank
God. Yeah.
God somebody wants to be a doctor. Thank God somebody wants to build a road. Thank God somebody wants to, go plow trails and take care of the forest. Like, that is the beauty of when we really do have the permission to live into that. And I know that, because I think this falls in the bucket of like, I'm desperate to fall in love. I'm desperate to find my career. I'm desperate to have money. Like, we live in a reality where there is a space between what I want and getting it, right? And it's like this time piece. Yes, that is a rule that we live under right now. But in the meantime, figuring out those things that you really truly love and infusing your life as much as you can with those pieces, even while we still might be confined to, a job or a relationship or whatever it is that we might not like at the moment, as much as we can infuse those things that really, really do light us up or honor those boundaries that we have, going for a walk, taking a nap, taking the day off, whatever it is, that is the start. That really is. That's getting that energy working. That is what magnetizes it all. Exactly what you're saying, Marissa. That is what magnetizes and really gets us into that flow. And it is freaking magical. It really is. And we were talking about this before we actually started recording, which is that, golly, when are we going to just accept that this is like magic can actually be real? And we refuse to believe, because we're so conditioned into this way of being, that, oh my gosh, like I really could create my reality. I mean that from a very grounded place. It sounds really whimsical and woo-woo, But I even said to my boyfriend the other day, I was like, I'm sorry, but you walk into a room, you can feel the energy of a room. You walk into, a coffee with your friend and you sit down. I don't care if they're going like this, smiling. If they're in a bad mood, you know it immediately. That is magic.
Can we talk about that for a moment? Because explaining energy, people think it's so abstract. And like when you elevate your energy to a higher vibrating frequency, it creates the channel, it creates the openness for the things that you want in your life to be magnetized to you. But I think it sounds so abstract and so woo woo, but it's not, because we all feel it every day. I don't know if you want to touch on it briefly, like give an example of how to feel energy in a room so that people can kind of make tangible what we're saying.
Gosh. The crazy thing is that I'm just going to describe what is so innate. You just don't even know that you're doing it, because everybody is an energy reader. Everybody is. I mean, somebody tell me if they've never felt energy before. But I just think also, because when we talk about energy, it's a feeling, and that you can't put language to it necessarily. And if we don't have language and logic to explain something, it can't be real. Okay. So first of all, just go listen to the telepathy tapes. Like, immediately just go and like let your mind open in that way. And then it's the presence. Okay. So walk into a room, take a deep breath, feel your feet on the ground, know where you are, and then look around and do what you're saying. And I think it's a great idea. Look at somebody and be like, oh, they seem upset. Why do I know that? I don't know. I can just feel it. I can just feel it. It's a feeling, right? So it is very hard to describe. That's when things become woo-woo, is when you don't have language to describe them. Okay. We're so stuck in like, I have to be able to talk about it or describe it. Sometimes we don't have that, but it doesn't mean it's not real, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right. Yeah. And I wanted to say about the energy piece too. I was a server for 15 years and I was pissed off about it. And I would walk into, there were so many shifts that I would walk into and I would just be this dark rain cloud. And the whole staff would respond to that and be like, I hate this too. If I had a day where I walked in there and was just like, you know what, we're going to have fun and we're going to sell natural wine and pasta to everybody. And everybody's got a completely different shift. Everybody's having a good time. So I would say, just before we leave that completely, that's another good energy experiment, is do it yourself. Like, see what happens when you bring negativity versus positivity into a room. Okay, so making those shifts, it is, I think, being aware of exactly what we're talking about, that energy. One of the biggest shifts I made, because I remember when I lived in Los Angeles and I had worked at this restaurant for 5 years, and we would close down the restaurant. We would drink wine and smoke cigarettes in the restaurant afterwards. And we would just be like, how do we get from here to where we want to be? And it felt like it would never happen, you know? In between those nights and now was a bunch of series of me listening to that intuition that guided me back to Atlanta, that guided me to make the decision to stay in Atlanta, that guided me to, get another restaurant job that I did not want to get, but that helped me form a community here, that I ultimately met my boyfriend at, that like all of these things that I can, of course, now from here look back and be like, okay, that makes sense why. When we don't have the, foresight or being able to like look back yet, it can feel like we're never going to get there. And I think that is, again, where these practices that we're recommending and talking about come in, where the presence really comes in. And when you can be, it doesn't mean you're always going to make the choice to be the positive, happy, shiny, oh my gosh, I love life all the time. You're not always going to choose that choice, and that is fine. But knowing that you can make the choice, I don't necessarily want to be working a customer service job, but I need to right now to, make money, whatever it is. Like, but I'm going to spend the time that I'm sitting at that desk, bringing my best self, because I love myself, I respect myself, and I want to spend every moment as much as I can just being where I am and knowing that also I will at some point understand why it happened that way. That doesn't like make it easy. I don't think. I think that like, when you really want to meet somebody and everybody's like, well, you'll meet them when you stop looking, and it's like, that is so annoying, because it's like, I'm never going to not be looking, like, yes, it's going to happen in an unexpected way, but I really think that the way to reframe that is, it's not when you stop looking, it's when you decide and you get clarity on, this is what I really want. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to live here exactly this. It doesn't have to be clarity like that. But I think clarity of what I want to feel, right, in my life. And then immediately trying to feel that is what helps bridge from here to here.
That's a really, really good point. Is that if you are looking for a relationship, I think if you are, just use that as an example, and you are focused on their height or what they do for work or how much money they make or whatever, that's not a feeling. That's rooted in ego. But if you focus on why you truly want a relationship because of how you want to feel in the relationship, you want to feel seen, you want to feel loved, you want to feel safe, you want to feel challenged in certain ways. You want to feel that you have similar hobbies and activities and you feel cozy and safe, whatever it may be, how you feel. The way that you magnetize that relationship to you is not by going out there and sitting at a bar and looking around and being like, where is he? Is that him? Is that him? Like, he looks the part. It is cultivating all of those same feelings through your friendships, through your nighttime routine, through the way you spend a weekend, through the way you structure your day. And when you align into that energy, not even focused on him, he will come. So I think when people say, like, it comes when you're not looking, it's that is true. It's a really annoying way to say it because it's not telling you how. But what you need to do is like back into how do you want to feel in that relationship? Not ego, not what it looks like, and then cultivate those feelings in every way that you can in your life.
100%.
The pre
Yeah.
the premise of, like, it comes when you're not looking is basically saying when you're good on your own and you're happy and you're fulfilled and you're not outsourcing that, then it shows up. And I think that's, like, the unsaid critical part of that statement is that, like, if you're waiting for that external fulfillment, you're looking for it in the wrong place. Like, you have to give it to yourself first.
It all circles back to that. I mean, really and truly, that it circles right back to the relationship that you have with yourself. Because in the meantime of all of this, of waiting for the career or the relationship or whatever it is, if you are truly getting to hang out with yourself and learning to enjoy that time, it doesn't matter what's happening outside of you as much. Well, it
And
doesn't matter at all if you're having a good time, you know,
and
and
then
if
you're
you're
happy.
floating, whatever. Like, that's it.
We could talk to you literally all day, Brittany, and I have a feeling you're going to be back for 100 more episodes. If you're up for it, we certainly are.
Love talking
I
to you.
want to ask you, what is one piece of advice? Marissa and I are going to take it ourselves and that you can offer the community that resonates with you today. What is one thing that you would tell the community to go out and do in their day or focus in on? It could be anything.
Gosh, one piece of advice. You know what? Find the humor, like really and truly, find the humor. And there is so much very, very, very serious stuff that's happening all the time. But as much as you can step out and see the absurdity of it all and laugh about it a little and be a little lighter, I think we desperately need levity, all of us. And I just think finding the humor as much as you can, and that is not to, minimize real pain and suffering that's happening, but for yourself, finding the little things to smile about or laugh about, you know, I think can make such a huge difference. That would be my advice for today. Find the humor.
I love that.
Yeah,
I laugh.
we're gonna take that for sure.
Good.
He's a
Good.
good word.
I love you both so much.
We love you. Thank you for coming on. It was so great to chat with you as always, and we will have you back.
Please do. You're both so wonderful. Thanks for having me on. And I hope everybody has a great, 2026.
If something in today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to pause and notice where it's sitting within you.
Living in alignment is not about fixing yourself or becoming someone new. It's about listening, trusting, and slowly coming home to who you already are.
Thank you for spending this time with us and for being part of this community.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might resonate with it too. See you next time.